listener production.
Hello, Sasha Barbagat with you. Welcome to The Briefing. When I was planning my trip to Europe, I wasn't scanning TripAdvisor or trawling Google reviews for the best places to eat. I was scrolling TikTok. What started as a very Gen Z social media platform for sharing dances and lip-syncing videos has morphed into a place reminiscent of the glory days of Instagram. There's travel inspo, dog videos, comedy, fashion, art. And TikTok has also become a mecca for foodies, both influencers and consumers alike. So many recent food trends have been born on the app. Think Logan's cucumber salad, girl dinner, or the feta tomato pasta. And it's also become the place for cafes, restaurants and food trucks to go viral. While it is a great way for businesses to drum up some exposure, we're now falling into the trap we did with Instagram years ago. Seemingly glowing reviews are actually paid for, and the consumer doesn't know it. Here's a recent example from creator Bites with Lily, who has a whopping 2.9 million followers on TikTok.
Crumble cookie review. Just kidding, we don't have it in Australia, but apparently these ones from the Cheesecake Shop are a good dupe. Let's taste them. First up, I'm trying red velvet. These were all $5.95, by the way. It's got a soft and fudgy texture, and I like the bits of white chocolate inside. Definitely on the sweet side, but I really like the flavour. I'd rate this a 7.5 out of 10. Let me know if you've tried these.
Look, working in the media, I know the Cheesecake Shop was recently sending out boxes of these treats to try. Now, we don't know whether Lily did get one of those boxes as well. But if she did, there is no indication on her post that she was asked or paid to review them, or sent the cookies for free. So what does the law say about food reviewers on TikTok? Do they have to disclose when they're being paid to make content? And does it actually matter if they do? Sydney-based lawyer and TikToker Jahan Kalanta is here with me now to explain. Jahan, welcome back to The Briefing. Look, TikTok has exploded in popularity and is now used by influencers just like we used to see with Instagram. We know there are strict rules around making advertisements on Insta. Do the same laws cover TikTok as well?
Absolutely. So any social media platform is governed by the laws that regulate the country of origin, like Australia. And under Australia, we have specific advertising guidelines that are enforced by various regulatory bodies. So TikTok, X, all of these platforms are governed by the law. And while we may not be seeing the same compliance in certain platforms, it certainly is a requirement for them to comply.
So what about when it comes to food businesses specifically? So I'm talking cafes or restaurants, even food trucks or food festivals. Do influencers on either platform, let's say Instagram or TikTok, have to disclose if they've been invited by the business to review them?
I think absolutely. Firstly, I think it's good practice to do so. There's arguably a question mark about whether or not you have to say you did or didn't. But in my view, you're receiving meaningful consideration being a free meal. And in exchange for that, you and the followers that you have and the general public have a right to know that, hey, the reason I'm talking so positively about this is because I received it for free or gratis. And, this is not uncommon that there's a current fairly popular radio show host who's in a bit of hot water for discussing a particular brand when not saying, hey, I actually have a relationship with this. It's something that happens.
Does it change, do you think, if it's, and when I say does it change, do you think in the mind of the creator, the content creator, that it changes if they're paid cash? So if it's like, and this is just a pure example, let's say it's Macca's and they go, hey, Jahan, we want you to come in and review cheeseburgers for us. We're going to pay you. Versus McDonald's saying, hey, can you just come in? We'll give you a free cheeseburger. Let us know what you think of it. Do you think in the influencer's mind it's different getting paid versus getting a free feed?
I absolutely think they draw a delineation and a distinction, but legally speaking, arguably there isn't one. If McDonald's gives me $1,000 worth of cheeseburgers or $1,000 cash, I'm still receiving $1,000 for my services being reviewing them. And so arguably you would fall under the same auspices of the law. It would be far more clear if it was cash. If it was cash, you really should be disclosing. You're making an advertisement. However, with food, I think a lot of people say, well, I'm just getting fed. What's the big deal? And the big deal is, well, you are telling something positive because of receiving something. It's in essence a bribe.
Interesting. That's a good take, actually. I want to know the difference then between when creators actively make an ad. Let's say it's for dog food. The content is similar to what the creator already makes, but it's clearly a paid promo. And there is a tag to show that under the caption. My question is, why aren't we seeing this used with food reviews then?
I think that people don't understand the hot water that they're treading in. And it makes sense, right? This is a sort of new space, and many creators are doing it the best that they can and figuring it out as they go along. So I don't think there's any malintent. I think the reality is, though, that legally speaking, especially here in Australia, we are governed by some pretty strict advertising standards. And it's entirely possible to completely accidentally breach those standards. But that's not going to stop you from being fined. It's not going to stop you from being in legal trouble.
What actually constitutes an ad under Australian law?
This was a fantastic question, and it kind of sent me down the rabbit hole. But essentially, the way you've got to think about an ad is it has to comply with certain standards and guidelines. What those standards and guidelines are depend really on largely is, what kind of product it is. For example, there's really specific standards around financial products and how we'd advertise those versus, for example, food. And so the best way to think about it is it's an invitation to the world to learn about something that complies with certain guidelines and rules.
The other complaint I'm seeing a lot with TikTok food reviews is around misleading information. So, the influencer comes in and they have this feed, and because they're getting it for free or they're getting paid, they're not being discerning. They're not saying, you know what, this place was actually kind of average. They're going, you've got to go to this place. It's really good. Everyone starts going because of the TikTok review, and then they go, oh, this isn't actually that good. So my question then is around making false or misleading representations. Now, under Australian consumer law, people can be liable for fines between $3.7K to $2.5 million for doing this. What is the likelihood, in your opinion, of a content creator finding themselves subject to a huge fine for doing this?
I think it's incredibly unlikely because they can always say, well, that was my experience and I'm sorry you didn't have a similar experience. It'd be very different if you, for example, they went to a pizza restaurant and they were served food that you can't access. That'd be a different sort of story.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, they're entitled to say, I had a really good time. I'm sorry your experience may vary. That's the case with almost any advertisement, right? And so misleading and deceptive conduct is really more around, hey, come in, this costs $10 and then, you get there. It's actually a bait and switch. So it's not likely they'll fall under those auspices, but the consumer law is vast and there's a ton of little holes that they can fall into. So while I wouldn't be worried about this one, there's other ones that definitely would freak me out.
Look, who's at fault here? Is it the creators? Is it the businesses? Is it us because we're not being more aware as to when we're being advertised to? Or is it the platform? Is it TikTok and they should be doing more to make sure that users are aware when something is an ad or when it's actually a genuine review?
I'm fond of this particular parable that I tell all of the time, and it's that when I was in law school, same-sex marriage was unlawful and cryptocurrency was not a thing. And now one of my biggest cases in my practice is arguing over which one of the same-sex couple should have the cryptocurrency wallet. And we're in a brave new world. We're exploring things that are uncommon and unusual, and the law will never be able to keep up with the changes in society and technology. I don't think it's anyone's fault. I think everyone's doing the best they can to figure it out, but a time will come, much like it did with Instagram, where you're going to be in trouble if you're behind the eight ball. And I think that day of reckoning may be coming sooner than we think. Yeah,
well, I wanted to ask you what you think the government should do, if anything, in this space.
Look, there's two approaches to these types of situations. One is a regulatory approach, i.e. the government comes in and says, well, if you're going to be advertising, you have to do this, this, and this. And I think that's probably a good possibility. Remember, the government already does this with products like financial products, for example, which are, Finfluencers have been absolutely and rightly decimated because you can destroy someone's financial well-being in a matter of hours.
Yeah.
Maybe an approach like that. And the second is self-managing and self-governing, people on TikTok calling out, hey, this influence is full of BS because, this is a terrible experience and they're incorrect. Or TikTok, the platform itself, saying, hey, you went and enjoyed a meal, you're going to receive a strike if you don't put that as a paid promotion. So I think self-governing is going to play a big role because I think that food in particular is not barring the food being toxic, hurting people, it's not a big enough playground for the government to be overly concerned with yet.
I guess that kind of leads me to my next question is, we're talking about people going to restaurants and eating food. It's not the be all and end all. No one's dying. Is it important for the law to effectively police social media in this space, or should we kind of just get over it and move on?
There's a wonderful Latin maxim called de minimis, which means the law does not concern itself with trivialities. And there's a really good argument that, it's a meal. And if you have a bad meal, that sucks, but life moves onwards. I think if it's deliberately misleading people or worse, for example, telling people, hey, you can come here and have, for example, a halal meal and you get there and you can't. That's a real issue.
Yeah.
And, you'd be discriminating against people example, or, this is a kosher restaurant and it's not.
Yeah.
So those are things that I think we need to worry about and concern ourselves with. But as a generality, no. If you're unhappy, the best thing you can do is hit unfollow on that TikToker and just move on with your life.
Look, with all this said then, if someone is really truly bothered by an influencer or a creator online that they think is kind of, doing these reviews and they're getting paid and they're not being truthful, if it really bothers that person, should they just dob that influencer into TikTok or to the watchdog or whatever? Like, is that the approach we should take?
It really depends on the individual. If something genuinely bothers you, you have every right to raise your voice. For me, you've got to be skeptical whenever you see something, and, following the money is not a bad rule. Ask yourself objectively, why would this person say the things that they're saying? Is there some ulterior motive? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But for me, I'm always skeptical when I see a review because I know that they're portraying it in the best conceivable light, and that's their job. In the same way, I'm skeptical when I see a car ad and I see it flying down a mountain doing all this amazing stuff. I'm skeptical about whether it will be as good as the experience. So I think it falls to each individual. I think as a society, we have bigger issues to crush first.
I think you'd be right there. As you said, we're in a brave new world. We're learning as we go. Thank you so much, Jahan. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was Jahan Kalanta speaking with me there. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That is it for now. Before you go, we would love it if you could share this ep with someone you think might enjoy it. And if you want to keep up with our other content, we are on TikTok. It's not food reviews, but it's news. Check us out, search Listener Newsroom. We are also on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. We'll be back in your feed tomorrow at 6 a.m. with headlines and another deep dive. I'm Sasha Barbagat. Thanks for listening.
Listener.